Hello, my name is Amir Smith, and today I'll be walking you through the safety presentation for chemistry and biology laboratory settings. So, some foundational things we can do in our classrooms to set not only ourselves, but the classroom and students up for success. I have some tips here. So, organizationally speaking, we're going to go through routines, lesson plans that will make the environment safer. One thing I would suggest is always be willing to learn, even as an educator. There's always going to be new techniques, classroom layouts, pedagogies, classroom safety updates for high school, middle school labs. And I just ask that as educators, we're open to receiving new content in that area and applying it, trying different things. Know your schedule is important. Knowing when you have classes coming in and out, the classroom populations that are going to be coming out at certain times, just so you can plan ahead accordingly. Like it says in the next step, you don't ever want to be unprepared, especially when you have a lab going on, because that can lead to even more safety hazards. I would also suggest to just make sure you know your classroom size and just the room layout in general. You want to make sure that your classroom population does not exceed the recommended number of students that are supposed to be in the room at a given time. And you want to make sure walkways and areas where the labs are going to be conducted are going to be clear and safe for operation. And if you want more information on that, I would see the reference I have listed there at the bottom. Now we're going to go through labels in the science room. Your room number and location should be visibly posted somewhere with a map. I would also suggest having, as we'll talk about later, just emergency routes, but we'll get to that when we get to the fire section. If you have students in your classroom that have allergies, I would suggest posting on your door that this is a classroom where we don't eat X or Y or Z, just to make sure that that student is accounted for. And I would say that goes for all allergies. Emergency numbers and contacts should also be listed. I would suggest putting them by the phone for easy access in case of an emergency and having the extensions and calls for 911. I would suggest using Braille or any language other than English for accessibility purposes in case you have ELLs or any disabled students in your classroom, just to make sure that you have access for them to these emergency procedures and safety nets. I would also highly encourage you to label every hazard and chemical. Accurate labels are very important. Hydrochloric acid and water are both the same color. You want to make sure your students are knowing what they're using at all times. Certain chemicals blow up when you mix them together, they can cause fires. So we want to make sure that those are labeled. In terms of hazard, I have a non-exhaustive list listed here in figure one to the left. Um, Label things that are poisonous, combustible, biohazards, explosives, high voltage, corrosive. These are just a few. I'm sure there are many, many more out there. I'm not sure how many sorts of these substances or materials students will come into contact in a 7th through 12th setting, but in the event, it trains them for college level safety or even real world safety, just knowing to be safe and know what certain symbols mean. In terms of student lab procedures, this is a pretty standard lab procedure. I would say wash your hands before and after leaving the room. I would say that's just to prevent contamination, especially after handling materials during the lab. I'd also suggest washing your hands to prevent contamination as well. No horse playing. There's a lot of glass, a lot of things that could be tipped over, fires. Just avoid any physical contact that's unnecessary or unwanted. Having a space for bags to be left out, putting them under desks, or having cubbies for the students to put them in the event of a lab procedure. Um, they're tripping hazards and they're just clutter in the way that does not have to be there. In terms of instructor and student attire in the lab, or the science classroom in general, I would say hair tied back, longer hair. It can get caught on equipment, ignited on fire. I've personally seen that happen before. No baggy clothing. You don't want a bunch of space in an area like this. It can catch things, knock them over, spill things. Fire hazard again. But you do want to make sure you have long sleeve shirt and full length pants or skirt on. This is just to avoid spills and skin irritations if you're working with anything, and it's less direct skin exposure. No open toed shoes just because of spills. It's the most safe thing you can do. It's just to make sure you have sneakers on. For the lab, in the general science classroom, I would say slides, slippers, Crocs, and things like that are okay. But if it's a lab, I would say absolutely no open-toed shoes. And then in the lab, goggles are always to be worn. Anything getting your eye is an irritant, and you want to avoid that at all costs. And then just in a science room in general, I wouldn't say don't let the kids eat snacks or drink water, but make sure they don't bring it into the lab part of the classroom just to prevent contamination because they're going to be eating and drinking it. And I would definitely, again, recommend to wash your hands before and after eating. All right, safety materials and maintenance use. As a student, I would recommend that you as the instructor for the instructor I would recommend that you collect gather all the materials that could be hazardous for the students ahead of time and give them minimal requirement to be handling them unless the lab or work calls for it. I would say make sure you demonstrate ahead of time if the students do have to handle any chemicals. Give them warnings, tell them not to mix anything, drink anything, inhale. um, just give them proper modeling of how we're supposed to do things when handling potentially hazardous or dangerous materials. On the first day of class, I would recommend this, showing students where safety showers, eye wash stations, and fume hoods are. Safety showers are to be used for emergency only. It's gallons and gallons and gallons of water that gets poured down. It's to be used in the event of a corrosive or toxic spill on the student. You want to make sure they're thoroughly washed off. Um, and I would say have maintenance check that and make sure it is operational and that it would work in the event you do need to use it. Eye wash stations are in the event that something contaminates a student's eyes. You have to run the water from the eye wash station for 15 minutes. Not more, not less, but make sure that they do it for the 15 minutes. And maintenance, again, should be regularly checking to make sure that they work. And then fume hoods. I don't know if every district can provide fume hoods for the science classrooms, but I would say if a chemical has any fume hazard, that it should definitely be handled in the hood. And it's just proper science technique to teach the students. Emergency procedures. I gathered all the information in terms of fire from Investigating Safely by Texley and Summers. Fire extinguishers should be available in every classroom and in the halls of every school building. There are certain kinds of fires you need to know how to deal with, class A, B, C, and D. And if you want more information on that, I would see Investigating Safely by Texley and Summers. Teach students the stop, drop, and roll method. Once again, show them the safety shower in the event, fire blankets. In terms of exiting procedures, you should have a drawn map somewhere in your classroom, and you should have at some point in your semester, school year, gone on with students to describe to them the exiting procedure and the expectations of them during that in terms of behavior. In the event of a student medical or injury emergency, I would have, as an instructor, remove all the other students from the classroom, call the nurse or the proper medical authorities in that situation, and make sure that the proper response is begun, whether that be a lockdown or a hold in place, just to make sure that the situation can be handled as privately and best as possible. Waste disposal is important. There's three kinds of waste that you're going to have in a science classroom in the 7th through 12th setting. You have regular waste where you're just going to have students throw things out in the basic garbage. And you're going to have hazardous waste at times if you're handling chemicals. This is stuff that's not good for the environment or simply cannot be disposed of down the drain. You're going to want to collect this and send this to the proper authorities who can handle it and dispose of it properly. And then you're going to want to have glass disposal. Make sure you teach your students they cannot clean up broken glass as a safety procedure and that there's specific bins that the glass goes in. And that goes for hazardous waste as well. You want to make sure the students are aware of that for both hazardous waste and glass waste, there are separate waste containers that these things go into that are not regular waste. And I would say, once again, this is a really good thing to discuss at the beginning of the school year with students. This is more so for life science classrooms. The ethical treatment of animals or living species in your science classroom. This figure in the data, points, tips, observations. These was all gathered from Investigating Safely by Texley and Summers again. So I would definitely see them on that. Um, if you want more information, you should also look into your compliance laws for your local state. Uh, and here we have the safety assessment we can now take because we learned about sign safety.